Prologue. Gwendolyn Lancaster, defying her mother's wishes, insists on joining the Spire Arcus Guard rather than attending finishing school or studying etheric engineering. Despite her mother's objections, Gwendolyn remains resolute in her decision. A confrontation ensues, during which Gwendolyn demonstrates her skill with a powerful gauntlet, incapacitating two armsmen and forcing her mother to acknowledge her determination. She eventually leaves Lancaster Manor, despite her mother's tears and pleas, symbolizing her break from family expectations. The scene shifts to her mother, who reflects on Gwendolyn's stubbornness and the significance of her choice. Lady Lancaster confides in Captain Esterbrook, explaining that Gwendolyn's decision is part of larger, mysterious events unfolding in Spire Albion. Strange occurrences with the crystals and rising tensions in the spires suggest looming conflict. Lady Lancaster believes her daughter must learn about the brewing strife firsthand, in service to the Archangels. In Chapter 1, Captain Grimm prepares his airship, Predator, for a dangerous engagement with an Auroran merchant vessel. As a storm brews and the ship closes in on the target, Grimm orders his crew into action, ensuring their weapons and defensive systems are ready. Tension rises as the crew prepares for battle, with Captain Grimm remaining calm and resolute. The Predator's weapons are readied and the ship is powered up, using etheric currents to gain speed. The crew is nervous, especially Commander Creedy, who is more accustomed to warships, but Grimm reassures him with his unshakable confidence. As the Predator approaches the enemy, Grimm considers using a steep dive to avoid the storm and gain an advantage. When the time comes, the ship prepares for the deadly encounter, and Captain Grimm, confident and composed, gives the order to dive into battle, signaling the start of the confrontation. In Chapter 2, Captain Grimm commands his ship, Predator, in a risky dive toward an Auroran merchant ship. The maneuver is intense, causing the ship to strain under the pressure. As Predator drops rapidly, the crew braces for the upcoming battle. They unleash a broadside of etheric cannon fire, targeting the Auroran ship's shroud, which absorbs the incoming blasts. The Auroran ship retaliates with its own fire, hitting Predator's shroud but failing to breach it. Despite the damage, Predator maintains control and successfully disables the enemy ship, though not without sustaining significant damage itself. The crew realizes that the real threat, the legendary warship Itasca, is approaching, and Grimm orders a swift retreat into the mist. As Predator struggles with damage to its lift crystal and other critical systems, Grimm reflects on their near-death encounter and prepares to return home to Spire Albion. In Chapter 3, Bridget struggles with the impending separation from her home and the duty to serve in the Spire Arc's Guard. Her father, Franklin Tagwynn, urges her to honor the family obligation despite her fears and reluctance. As she contemplates her future, Bridget's beloved cat, Rowl, provides both comfort and advice, encouraging her to face her duty with courage. Bridget, feeling a mix of fear and sadness, finally agrees to go, knowing it is her responsibility. Her father introduces Rowl as her guide for the year, and Bridget, though initially reluctant, smiles, realizing that her cat will be with her. Her decision marks the beginning of her journey, as she prepares to leave her home for a year of service guided by Rowl and the weight of family duty. She faces the challenges ahead with resolve, promising to carry out her responsibility to the Tagwynn name. In Chapter 4, Gwen endures grueling physical training for the Spire Arcus Guard, struggling with the demanding exercises, uncomfortable clothing, and lack of experience. Her cousin, Benedict, teases her while offering support, and Gwen feels increasingly incompetent as she faces challenges in both physical training and academic lessons on Spire politics. After a tough training session, she finds herself dealing with Reginald Astor, who constantly mocks her and her family. The situation escalates when Reginald insults Bridget, a large, quiet recruit, causing tension. Bridget retaliates with a sharp insult, and Reginald challenges her to a duel. Gwen, attempting to mediate, unintentionally complicates matters. She helps Bridget accept the challenge, but regrets her interference, realizing she should have allowed Bridget to handle the situation herself. As Bridget prepares for the duel, Gwen recognizes the complexities involved and offers her assistance, realizing Bridget needs help navigating the formalities of a duel. In Chapter 5, Bridget reluctantly agrees to some training with Benedict Sorellin-Lancaster, who assesses her physical strength. Despite her doubts, Bridget easily tosses Benedict, impressing him. Benedict suggests an unarmed duel for her upcoming challenge with Reginald Astor, believing that it could give Bridget an edge over Reggie, who is physically stronger but lacks her strength of character. Gwen Lancaster joins them, offering her insight and teasing Benedict. Bridget remains focused on avoiding unnecessary conflict, especially with Reginald, and refuses to humiliate him. Gwen encourages Bridget to use her strength strategically in the duel without aiming for total victory. As the conversation continues, Bridget's bond with the cat Rowl deepens, leading to an unexpected camaraderie between Bridget and the Lancaster cousins. The chapter ends with a gesture of goodwill as Gwendolyn invites Bridget and Rowl to breakfast, and Rowl accepts with his usual quiet dignity. In Chapter 6, Rowl watches as Bridget undergoes ridiculous training exercises with Benedict and Gwendolyn, including practice falls, which Rowl finds unnecessary. Merle, a black-furred cat and spy for Roll's father, arrives with news of missing cats in other Habbles and hints at a larger unknown threat. Despite Roll's frustration with the human training methods, he remains involved and provides his thoughts on the upcoming duel between Bridget and Reginald. He warns that the Astor family might retaliate if Bridget harms Reginald, but Gwendolyn promises to challenge Reggie if anything happens to her. As Bridget continues with her practice, the tension builds when Barnabas, Reggie's second, arrives and questions Roll being Bridget's second. In a dramatic move, Roll attacks Barnabas, asserting his role and making clear that Bridget will fight Reggie in a week. The scene ends with Roll confidently claiming his place in the duel. In Chapter 7, Captain Grimm faces Commodore Hamilton Rook's persistent offer to buy his ship, Predator, promising a large sum of money in exchange. Rook insists the ship is obsolete and attempts to pressure Grimm by threatening legal action and public disgrace. Grimm rejects the offer twice, leading to a physical confrontation where he slaps Rook twice, warning him that any harm to his crew will be personally blamed on Rook. After the tense encounter, Grimm is joined by Commodore Bayard, who offers his support and lightens the mood. Bayard suggests Grimm might need to speak with the Spire Ark, and reveals that he was sent to find Grimm. As they walk through a dim tunnel, Grimm's instincts warn him of an ambush. A cannonball of agony strikes Grimm in the chest, signaling the beginning of a dangerous confrontation. In Chapter 8, Captain Grimm and Commodore Bayard are ambushed by strange creatures in the ventilation tunnels. Grimm is injured but fights fiercely, eventually taking down one of the creatures with his blade. After the fight, Bayard helps Grimm, who is severely wounded, and they make their way to a safe location. Grimm is then cared for by an eccentric etherealist named Ferris, who has treated Grimm's injuries, though in his peculiar manner. Grimm wakes in a small, dimly lit room, with his arm heavily bandaged and feeling disoriented. Ferris, with his odd behavior and mix of mischief and expertise, provides some cryptic answers about Grimm's condition. As Grimm tries to make sense of the situation, Ferris reveals that they've reached the end of something important, signaling a significant shift. Grimm realizes he's dealing with someone far more dangerous and knowledgeable than he initially assumed. In Chapter 9, Gwendolyn and Benedict discuss the upcoming duel involving Bridget Tagwynn. Gwendolyn is concerned about the consequences for House Tagwynn, especially with Rowl, a cat, as Bridget's second. Benedict encourages her to think strategically, considering not only the duel's implications for Tagwynn, but also for their own house. They stop for food, and Gwendolyn encounters a rude man, Addie, who turns out to be the Spire Addison Orson Magnus Jeremiah Albion. After an awkward exchange, Gwendolyn realizes she's been disrespectful to the Spire. He explains his role as a largely symbolic leader, but reassures her that he holds respect for House Lancaster. He emphasizes that both Gwendolyn and Benedict will face challenges in the Guard, and that their actions today will have broader consequences. The Spire Arca's attention increases the stakes of the duel, making it a matter of house reputation. In Chapter 10, Bridget prepares for her duel against Reggie Astor in the Market of Habble Morning. As tensions rise, Bridget receives guidance from the Master of Arms, Mr. Estabrook, who explains the rules of the duel and the importance of maintaining order. Reggie arrives, making a provocative remark, which causes Rowl to react aggressively. Estabrook mediates the situation, and Bridget decides to proceed with the duel. When the duel begins, Bridget faces off with Reggie, who smirks confidently, but Bridget, focusing on Benedict's advice, prepares herself mentally. However, just as the duel starts, a sudden loud shriek pierces the air, signaling an air raid. Estabrook confirms that Spire Albion is under attack and urges Bridget to seek shelter. The chapter ends with a shift in focus from the duel to the looming danger of an external threat. In Chapter 11, Captain Grimm returns to his ship, Predator, after being injured in a surprise attack by a creature in the shipyard's ventilation tunnels. Despite his injury, Grimm discusses the ship's repair needs and the potential pressure from the high houses to sell the ship. His officer, Creedy, suggests taking on a cargo run to generate funds, but Grimm dismisses the idea, focusing instead on finding other solutions. As they continue their conversation, Grimm hears the war cry of an Auroran destroyer, signaling an attack on the Spire. The enemy ships, including the Ciervo, begin bombing the shipyard, destroying vessels and causing chaos. Grimm orders the crew to prepare for defense, realizing the attack is likely a distraction for an Auroran troop drop. With the fleet's forces mobilizing slowly, Grimm and Creedy plan to defend the Spire and delay the enemy marines. In Chapter 12, the group seeks shelter amidst a chaotic attack on Spire Albion. Gwen, Benedict, and Bridget head towards safety, but Bridget urgently needs to reach her father. As the Spire shakes with explosions, they find a wounded man trapped under rubble, Barnabas Astor, and work together to treat his injuries. Benedict's calm leadership helps them stabilize him, and they move him to a side tunnel for safety. Gwen explains the political motivations behind the Auroran attack, believing it to be an economic ploy to seize wealth from Albion. As the group tends to Barnabas, they are approached by a squad from the Spire Arc's guard, but something feels off. Benedict's subtle cues reveal that the guard may not be who they seem. Realizing the danger, Gwen uses her gauntlet to strike one of the officers in the face, suspecting the squad to be enemy infiltrators. In Chapter 13, after Gwen discharges her gauntlet at the false guardsman, the tunnel is plunged into darkness and chaos erupts. Benedict engages with the attackers, while Gwen takes cover and fires another shot, unsure of her target. The invaders, led by a warriorborn named Diego Chiriaco, threaten to kill Bridget if they don't stand down. Benedict releases his hold on one of the invaders and negotiates, but Chiriaco insists on an impending victory for the attackers. Gwen, maintaining control of the situation, threatens to destroy the explosives the invaders carry, ensuring no one can interfere. However, Chiriaco taunts her with the certainty of reinforcements arriving, claiming time is on their side. Gwen and Benedict are forced to face the fact that they are at an impasse, with Chiriaco's forces poised to overpower them. The chapter ends with Gwen's determination, refusing to surrender just yet. In Chapter 14, Grimm, though reluctant, prepares his crew for combat after the Auroran attack on Spire Albion. With his arm injured, Grimm insists on joining the crew in defending the Spire, while Creedy is tasked with keeping him protected. The crew prepares, donning old armor, and Grimm devises a strategy to prevent the invaders from breaching the ventilation tunnels. When they reach the Lancaster Battery, Grimm realizes that the enemy, disguised as the Spire Arc's guard, is holding back and awaiting reinforcements. Grimm leads a flanking maneuver with Creedy's squad to ambush the invaders. The crew charges toward the enemy's position, weapons ready, despite the strong defensive setup of the Aurorans. The chapter ends with a rousing cry of "Albion!" as Grimm and his crew prepare for the confrontation. In Chapter 15, Grimm's flanking attack stalls under a hail of Auroran gauntlet fire and long gun blasts, costing 20 of his men before the enemy's discipline repels the first wave. Wounded by a close strike, Grimm leaps the decorative garden wall into the battery grounds alongside Kettle, only to be pushed back by professional Auroran Marines. Just as the defenders gain the upper hand, Creedy's reserve squad appears opposite the wall, delivers a devastating volley that drops half the Marines, and allows Grimm's crew to surge through the gaps. In under 2 seconds, the invaders are overwhelmed. 3 live prisoners and several casualties captured. Afterwards, Grimm and Creedy tally 11 dead, 4 unwounded captives, and dozens wounded. Lancaster retainers secure the battery. Its owners send physicians and shelter for predators wounded. First Armsman Esterbrook arrives to thank Grimm and offers safe haven for the survivors, confirming the raid was coordinated. Noting more Aurorans may lurk underground, Grimm orders a perimeter patrol and sends Stern's new long gun team forward. In Chapter 16, Bridget is held captive by Auroran warriorborn Chiriaco, who threatens her life. She cleverly proposes a deal to him. He can take her and leave the explosives behind, offering a chance for both sides to survive. After a tense standoff, Chiriaco considers her offer but refuses. Bridget's struggle to escape intensifies as she uses her knowledge of his weakened arm to shift the situation, allowing her to throw him into a wall. Just as the standoff reaches a critical point, Rowl signals that help is coming. Grimm and his crew arrive, engaging the Aurorans in a firefight. With precise shots, they incapacitate the enemy and secure Bridget. Benedict and Gwen assess the situation, and Bridget is taken to safety. However, Benedict hints that the fighting is far from over, signaling that the battle is escalating. The chapter ends with tension, hinting at more conflict ahead. In Chapter 17, Folly awakens from a recurring, terrifying dream, actually an etheric message, trapped in her homemade dreamcatcher. Master etherealist Ferris confirms the message was sent intentionally by a hidden enemy, despite it seeming impossible. War has just broken out, and Ferris decides they must leverage Captain Grimm's aid. As Folly prepares, intruders in guard uniforms burst into Ferris's library, axing down the door and firing gauntlets. Ferris calmly deflects their blast with etheric power drawn through his cane, overloading their weapons and immolating them. He dispatches the disguised attackers with a single radiant bolt and a burst of flame, leaving the library strewn with their remains. When Folly emerges, shaken, Ferris tells her they must leave Habel Morning at once. He instructs her to pack a bag and don his dueling suit, first to secure Captain Grimm's help from the Spire Arc, then to confront an old friend who has returned from the dead. In Chapter 18, Captain Grimm and his XO Creedy meet with Lord Albion, the Spire Arc, who requests that Grimm command his ship Predator on a crucial mission. Albion offers Grimm top-of-the-line lift and trim crystals for Predator in exchange for transporting a team to landing, a task Grimm initially rejects due to his past grievances with the Spire and his ship's condition. However, Albion persuades him by offering valuable ship repairs and emphasizing the importance of the mission. Grimm, reluctantly agreeing to the one-time job, is still troubled by the manipulation, but sees the opportunity to restore Predator to full function. He commands Creedy to inform their engineer to prepare for the trip, signaling a tense partnership with the Spire Arc despite the underlying conflict. The chapter sets the stage for a pivotal mission, while highlighting Grimm's struggle between duty and personal pride. In Chapter 19, Major Ronaldo Spira, an Auroran Marine, navigates the cramped streets of Habel Landing, reflecting on the success of his battalion's assault on Spire Albion. As he moves through the crowded streets, he arrives at the home of Madame Sycorax Cavendish, a powerful and calculating figure. Aspira informs her of a potential threat to their mission, a captured verminiciter who may have compromised their position. Despite his initial discomfort, he requests her help in determining the truth of the verminiciter's story. Madame Cavendish agrees to assist him, but insists on maintaining control of the situation, demonstrating her formidable influence. The chapter highlights Aspira's reliance on her skills and intelligence while hinting at a dangerous alliance between the two. The scene concludes with Madame Cavendish subtly asserting her dominance, leaving Aspira uneasy yet bound to her will. In Chapter 20, Gwendolyn Lancaster and her companions are summoned to Lord Albion's manor, where they are assigned to a new mission. They have been inducted into the Spire Arc's Guard, despite their lack of formal training. While discussing their previous encounter with the Aurorans, Gwen insists they triumphed, despite the challenges they faced. Lord Albion reveals that their next task is to investigate a potential traitor within the Spire. They are to assist Master Ferris in his inquisition, which involves traveling to Habel Landing, a hub of information and black market trade. Benedict is tasked with protecting Ferris, while Bridget will serve as a liaison to the local cats, and Gwen will ensure the Inquisition proceeds smoothly by handling any obstacles. The group must leave immediately to begin their covert mission. The chapter emphasizes the Spire's internal struggle and sets the stage for the team's pivotal role in uncovering a traitor. In Chapter 21, Bridget and her companions ascend to the shipyards atop Spire Albion, where they meet Captain Grimm and prepare to board the airship Predator. Bridget, feeling both awe and anxiety, struggles with the overwhelming height and the exposure to the open sky, a new experience for her. She converses with Grimm, learning more about the dangers of etheric energy and the eccentricities of etherealists like Master Ferris. Upon reaching the ship, Bridget is awed by the sheer size and complexity of Predator, with its wooden construction and etheric propulsion. As they prepare to board, Bridget meets Folly, a peculiar girl who seems to be conversing with a jar of spent lumen crystals. Their small group is then greeted by Byron Creedy, Predator's executive officer, who leads them aboard. The chapter highlights the group's new mission and introduces the unique dynamics aboard the airship as they prepare for their journey. In Chapter 22, Gwen Lancaster aboard the Predator reflects on her growing skepticism toward Captain Grimm and his crew. Although their help in the recent battle saved her life, she questions whether Grimm's involvement in the attack on her family's Vattery was coincidental. Gwen, determined to protect the Vattery, presses Commander Creedy about his past disgrace with the fleet, and the conversation escalates into tension, with Creedy warning her to respect Grimm. Later, Gwen confronts Grimm about the mysterious perilous incident, and he provides a cryptic answer, adding to her doubts. Kettle, the pilot, shares his respect for Grimm's unwavering duty, despite the captain's past. As they approach Habel Landing, Gwen reflects on Grimm's character, whether he is a coward or a man driven by duty, and concludes that he might be a man of remarkable resolve, whose motivations she still needs to understand. Chapter 23 finds Captain Grimm awoken by Stern's knock as Predator loiters offshore, still awaiting a berth. Grimm, exhausted and convalescing, tidies himself before learning Bayard's wife has dispatched him to check on Grimm's welfare. Over brandy, Bayard reveals that Albion has formally declared war on Aurora, and the Admiralty has, in cautious response, ordered the entire fleet into defensive patrols. Frustrated by their passivity, Bayard invites Grimm to reclaim his fleet commission and command the cruiser Valiant as his flag captain. Grimm refuses, bound by his duties to the Spire Ark. Bayard then informs him that Creedy will be reinstated to active duty within a week. As Bayard departs, he spots a cat perched atop Predator's forward mast, a silent sentinel hinting that even in war's chaos, the Spire's secrets and its unlikely guardians endure. In Chapter 24, Rowl observes his human companions as they arrive in Habel Landing. He finds the view from the ship's mast unimpressive and the atmosphere of the city overwhelming. The group, led by Gwendolyn, navigates the crowded streets, encountering various human behaviors and challenges, including a suspicious encounter with a street urchin, Grady, who leads them into a dangerous alley. Rowl senses danger and alerts Little Mouse, and the group quickly realizes they are being followed by footpads. Gwendolyn acts decisively, using her gauntlet to create a powerful blast that sends the would-be attackers fleeing. Afterward, she confronts Grady, suspecting him of leading them into a trap, and after a tense exchange, he offers to guide them to a safer inn. The group continues their journey, and Benedict thanks Rowl for his vigilance. Rowl is pleased with his actions, proud to have kept his humans safe. In Chapter 25, Bridget and her group navigate the bustling streets of Habel Landing, with Bridget feeling uneasy and uncertain about what danger might look like. As they pass through various crowded streets filled with craftsmen, traders, and foreign travelers, Benedict explained the power and organization of the guilds, which control much of the illegal activity in the area. The group arrives at the Monastery of the Way, where Brother Vincent, a monk and former mentor to Benedict, guards the entrance. Benedict challenges Vincent to a quick combat demonstration, which ends with Benedict being pinned, showcasing Vincent's skill. Afterward, they discuss their need for help in the ongoing conflict, and Vincent, understanding the gravity of the situation, agrees to assist. The group is welcomed inside the temple, where they seek refuge and guidance. In Chapter 26, Gwendolyn and her group enter the Temple of the Way in Habel Landing. Inside, the temple's lush courtyard surprises Gwendolyn with its dense, thriving vegetation. The monks, led by Brother Vincent, guide them through the temple's hallways and introduce them to the great library, which holds an immense collection of books, impressing Gwen with its value. Benedict, who has a history with Vincent, asks for assistance in securing a safe place for their inquisition. Brother Vincent explains the temple's policy of neutrality in political matters, but hints at the complexity of choosing an inn in the Habel, where loyalty can be bought. Gwendolyn, with her sharp wit, cleverly pushes for advice, eventually extracting a recommendation for an innkeeper who would remain loyal once paid. Their conversation ends with a bit of banter, showcasing Gwendolyn's determination and Vincent's subtle amusement. In Chapter 27, Gwendolyn, Benedict, and the rest of the group head to the Black Horse Inn in Habel Landing, following their visit to the temple. The innkeeper initially refuses them lodging, but they eventually settle for a dinner in their suite. Master Ferris, noticing the local activity, suggests they gather information. While Benedict is constrained by his orders to stay close to Ferris, the etherealist decides to pretend to be drunk to blend in and gather intel. Meanwhile, Bridget and Folly, along with Rowl, are tasked with contacting the local cats for information. Bridget hesitates to involve Gwendolyn, knowing her forceful personality would be counterproductive with the cats. Gwendolyn insists on helping, and despite some tension, Bridget proceeds with the plan, leaving Gwendolyn to stay out of the way. The group prepares to take action, each with a specific task, as Ferris and Benedict begin their mission of subtle investigation. In Chapter 28, Captain Grimm inspects the new lift and trim crystals being unloaded for Predator. The crew discovers that the large lift crystal is from a battlecruiser, and vastly more powerful than needed for their ship, which will make Predator significantly faster and more efficient. Grimm realizes the Spire Arc has gone above and beyond in providing these high-quality parts, making the ship far more formidable than he expected. However, installing the new crystals requires modifications to the ship's systems, which Journeyman estimates will take about a month to complete. Grimm insists on a quicker turnaround, pushing for a week to have the ship operational, even if it means a less than perfect setup. Journeyman reluctantly agrees to the tight deadline. Grimm orders around-the-clock shifts and additional engineers to speed up the process. The chapter highlights Predator's imminent transformation into a faster, more dangerous vessel. In Chapter 29, Bridget reflects on her past peaceful life and contrasts it with her current situation, navigating a dangerous haggle with Rowl and Folly. As they walk, Folly experiences a strange sense of being watched, which Bridget initially doesn't understand. The two women encounter a local cat, and Rowl engages in a standoff, displaying typical cat diplomacy. Their conversation turns to the mission, with Bridget speculating that the Aurorans might be using cats as scouts. Folly reveals her fear, hinting at something more dangerous than cats, something from the surface. Bridget realizes that if the Aurorans have managed to tame a wild surface creature, it could pose a grave threat to the Spire. Folly ominously shares that the Aurorans want to destroy everyone, and Bridget begins to understand the severity of the situation as the impending danger seems inevitable. In Chapter 30, Master Ferris continues his unconventional methods to enhance his perception of etheric energy, explaining how different individuals can experience the same phenomena differently. He uses a drinking strategy to alter his mind's perception, hoping to sense the etheric presence of another etherealist, possibly one of the Aurorans. Gwen and Benedict discuss the likelihood of an etherealist being involved in the recent attacks, with Ferris acknowledging the possibility. Ferris's goal is to locate this individual by changing his mental state, though he admits that distance may be hindering his success. They agree that time is running out, and Ferris reluctantly waits for the right moment to proceed. The chapter highlights Ferris's eccentric but focused approach, the growing urgency of their mission, and the tension between urgency and patience. The group prepares for the next steps while acknowledging the limitations of time and perception. In Chapter 31, Captain Grimm is called to the deck of the Predator to address a potentially troubling situation. A large armed merchantman, the Mist Shark, arrives in the shipyards, which raises suspicions about its intentions. Captain Ransom, a former acquaintance of Grimm's, arrives aboard the Mist Shark, and her arrival stirs up tension. Despite her charm, Grimm remains wary of her, suspecting her motives and the real purpose behind her visit. She offers Grimm a job, but he rejects her offer, citing the damage to Predator and the need for repairs. After Ransom leaves, Grimm reflects on the strange timing of the Mist Shark's arrival, questioning if it's connected to the Spire Arc's mission to uncover an enemy force. He orders close surveillance of the Mist Shark and plans to meet with his engineers, hinting that there is more to the situation than meets the eye. In Chapter 32, Major Aspera inspects the condition of his unit's weapons, reprimanding a Marine for failing to properly maintain his sword. Aspera's strictness in ensuring readiness is juxtaposed with a personal loss, as Sergeant Siriaco reveals that Lieutenant Lazaro was killed after making a fatal mistake during a mission. Lazaro's failure to act decisively led to his death, and Aspera reflects on the harshness of war and the cost of mistakes. The conversation shifts when Aspera notices Madame Cavendish, who has just returned from dealing with a captured verminicitor. She suggests a brutal plan tries to dispose of the body, to avoid further investigation by the Verminicitors Guild, ordering the man's death to be staged as a quick execution. Aspera reluctantly agrees, and the chapter ends with him instructing Siriaco to carry out the grim task. The cold, calculated nature of their mission is underscored by the sobbing from the tunnel, adding to the chapter's dark tone. In Chapter 33, Bridget and Folly meet the Nine Claws clan of cats, led by Non. Rowl introduces Bridget as his human, and they request the clan's help from Non. However, Non refuses, stating that the Nine Claws do not involve themselves in human affairs, especially wars. Bridget is shocked by this rejection, but prepares to argue further. Folly, however, notices that the cats are uneasy, sensing they are being watched. As tension rises in the chamber, Non orders Bridget and Folly to leave, with the implicit threat that their lives are forfeit if they disobey. Bridget, determined not to fail in her mission, prepares for another attempt. However, before she can act, Folly warns her, sensing the watchful eyes of someone else in the shadows. Non, now weary, directs them out, signaling that their audience is over, and they are escorted back to the ropes. In Chapter 34, Rowl, Bridget, Little Mouse, and Folly are escorted by Non's warriors through the ventilation tunnels. Rowl senses something is off, suspecting that Non intends to expose them to danger. As they move through the tunnels, they encounter a hole in the ceiling filled with silkweaver creatures, which Bridget recognizes as a dangerous surface-dwelling species. When the silkweavers drop from the hole, Rowl swiftly kills several of them, with Little Mouse using her strength to crush others. However, a flood of hundreds more silkweavers emerges, overwhelming them. Realizing the danger, Little Mouse orders a retreat. The group flees down the tunnel, pursued by the relentless swarm of silkweavers. The chapter showcases Rowl's combat prowess and the growing peril as they confront an unexpected threat in the depths of the spire. In Chapter 35, Folly experiences an eerie premonition as she senses future events, realizing she can track possible outcomes. When a wave of silkweavers appears, she quickly grasps that they were puppets, controlled by a greater force. As the swarm attacks, Folly uses her ethereal abilities to unleash a massive burst of energy, transforming lumen crystals into powerful electric blasts that decimate the creatures. After the battle, Folly is exhausted but receives praise from Bridget. However, the threat is far from over, as Rowl and Bridget suspect that the adult silkweavers, responsible for the massive silk lines, are still somewhere nearby. The chapter ends with Folly realizing the true threat, the malevolent force behind the silkweavers. This unsettling presence is the enemy, and their deadliest weapons are still to come, leaving the group in increasing danger. In Chapter 36, Gwen, Benedict, and Master Ferris are at the Black Horse Inn, where Master Ferris leads a drunken sing-along. The group is interrupted by an Olympian man, Commodore Horatio Pine, who demands that they vacate a room reserved for him. Gwen stands her ground, introducing herself and asserting that the room is still needed. Pine becomes aggressive, but Gwen defends herself, warning him of the rule of law in Albion. However, tensions rise when Ferris suddenly collapses, prompting him to calmly instruct Benedict to draw his sword and Gwen to prime her gauntlet. Before the situation can escalate further, the doors burst open, and alien shrieks fill the air, signaling the arrival of a new, unforeseen danger. In Chapter 37, a silkweaver enters the Black Horse Inn, causing panic as it attacks patrons with lethal precision. Gwen and her companions quickly assess the situation, with Benedict drawing attention to the silkweaver's vulnerability in its belly. They plan to engage it despite its formidable strength and armor. As the creature wreaks havoc, Gwen takes charge, rallying the remaining patrons to fight. Benedict leads the silkweaver into the open to expose it to attack, but despite several attempts, the creature proves difficult to defeat. When the silkweaver corners Benedict, Master Ferris distracts it, allowing Gwen to use her gauntlet and a bottle of liquor to set the creature on fire. The silkweaver retaliates, but Gwen takes a final shot, using her gauntlet to deal a powerful blow. However, as the silkweaver falls, Gwen is left disoriented and unconscious from the impact. In Chapter 38, Bridget, Folly, and Rowl venture back toward the silkweaver nest. Bridget, though fearful, insists on investigating to learn more about the creature's origins, while Folly hesitates, unsure of the danger. Bridget climbs a rope with Rowl riding on her shoulders, navigating the difficult task with determination. Upon reaching the nest, Bridget discovers the nest's intricate design, filled with valuable ether silk and cradles for the silkweavers. She realizes that the Nine Claws gathering might have been due to the presence of the silkweaver's eggs. The larger nest, empty of inhabitants, likely belonged to the matriarch. Bridget connects the dots, understanding that Non wanted them to discover this hidden lair. She resolves to return and inform Master Ferris, signaling the importance of the discovery. In Chapter 39, Captain Grimm steps in to help feed the crew after a lack of proper provisions on the AMS Predator. He supervises the crew's meal preparation, facing resistance from the XO, Creedy, who is uncomfortable with the captain performing such tasks. Meanwhile, Grimm reflects on his leadership and the importance of understanding the crew's needs. Later, Grimm is informed of a disturbance involving his passengers at the Black Horse Inn. A silkweaver attacked, causing chaos and casualties. Grimm leads a team to the scene, directing the men to break down the doors and assess the situation. Inside, they discover the horrifying aftermath of the silkweaver's attack, with several dead and others wounded. Grimm also meets Madame Cavendish, who seems to have hidden motives. He suspects the attack was no coincidence and prepares to move Master Ferris and his group back to the ship to prevent further danger. In Chapter 40, Captain Grimm and his crew head back to the AMS Predator after a silkweaver attack at the Black Horse Inn. Along the way, Sir Benedict recounts the events, including how Gwen fought off the silkweaver despite being injured. Grimm reflects on the attack, suspecting it was not a random act and that the enemy is aware of their presence. Master Ferris, though intoxicated, suggests investigating the verminiciders to gather information. Ferris also expresses concern about the danger he faces, given an encounter with an odd woman named Madame Cavendish, who Grimm suspects may be connected to the Aurorans. Grimm orders caution, urging Sorellin to stay with Ferris for protection. As they make their way to the verminiciders, Grimm discusses the eccentricity of etherealists and his trust in Ferris and Folly, despite their madness. He warns Sorellin about the potential danger of those who appear calm and rational. In Chapter 41, Major Aspira and Sergeant Syriaco are with Madame Cavendish in the ventilation tunnels, where she serves tea and discusses the urgency of their mission. Cavendish reveals that the enemy is present in Albion and that contingency measures are required. Aspira cautions against hasty actions, emphasizing the need for precision to avoid jeopardizing their escape plan. As the conversation unfolds, Lieutenant Ibarra, who had been missing, returns and behaves inappropriately towards Cavendish. In response, she tortures him by forcing him to gouge out his own eyes, demonstrating her sadistic power. Aspira is forced to cooperate with her demands to avoid further violence, as she suggests sending 6 men on a deadly task. Aspira reluctantly agrees, understanding that his choices are limited and the stakes are high. The chapter highlights Cavendish's control and the growing tension within their mission. In Chapter 42, Bridget and Folly return to the Black Horse Inn to find a disturbing scene. A crowd, broken doors, and bodies covered in blood-stained sheets. After some hesitation, Bridget sends Folly to scout while she stays hidden in an alley. Rowl, a cat, sneaks closer and reports that the inn is filled with dead bodies and a large silkweaver, but he can't get a good look due to the heavy watch. Bridget, frustrated by their lack of information, decides they must return to the Predator and ask for Captain Grimm's help. However, before they can leave, they are ambushed by a group of Auroran Marines, including Sergeant Syriaco and an officer named Major Ronaldo Aspira. They are captured, with Folly rendered unconscious, and Bridget threatened with her friend's life if she resists. The chapter ends with the revelation that they are prisoners of the Auroran forces. In Chapter 43, Grimm and Benedict visit the Verminiciders Guild in Habel Landing to investigate unusual activity. The guild is tense, having recently lost one of its own, Harris Moberly, to a silkweaver attack. Felix, the guildmaster, reluctantly shares that Moberly had been working alone, violating guild rules, and was killed by hatchlings from a silkweaver matriarch. Benedict inspects Moberly's body and notices that the blood in the wounds is congealed, suggesting Moberly was dead before the silkweavers attacked. Benedict theorizes that Moberly's neck was broken before he was thrown to the creatures, likely by someone trying to silence him. Grimm concludes that Moberly must have gotten too close to the Aurorans, leading to his death. Grimm demands to know where Moberly's contract was, as the Aurorans are clearly present in Habel Landing. The chapter ends with Grimm preparing to act on this new information. In Chapter 44, Rowl follows the group that has captured Little Mouse and her friend into the ventilation tunnels, reflecting on the danger they pose to the Nine Claws due to their alliance with the Silkweavers. He realizes that the presence of Silkweavers, controlled by the enemy, could threaten the Nine Claws, especially their young. While tracking the captors, Rowl encounters Merle, another cat, who has been assigned to track the same group. Merle reports that the Aurorans' defenses are too strong to observe without being seen, revealing the presence of an adult Silkweaver guarding the area. Rowl requests Merle's help in informing the humans about the threat, especially a warrior aboard a ship named Predator. He insists it's crucial for his plans, though Merle's role is voluntary. The chapter ends with Rowl stating his intention to conquer the Nine Claws, signaling a shift in his priorities. In Chapter 45, Grimm prepares to lead a reconnaissance mission to locate the Auroran forces, instructing Creedy to arm and armor the crew. As he checks on Miss Lancaster's condition, Master Ferris informs him that she is stable but unconscious, with her head injury leaving her in a critical state. Ferris then reveals that the enemy has already arrived, as Madame Cavendish appears at the top of the ship's boarding ramp. She requests a parley, and despite Ferris's caution, Grimm invites her aboard. Ferris advises offering her tea to maintain politeness, as Cavendish holds an advantage. Grimm, though wary, complies and welcomes her with a polite bow. As they proceed, Grimm feels a deep unease, sensing Cavendish's cold, calculating nature. The chapter ends with her accepting the invitation, leaving the crew on edge about what her intentions might be. In Chapter 46, Captain Grimm prepares for a reconnaissance mission to locate the enemy in the tunnels of Habel Landing, assigning his crew to be armed and ready. He discusses the situation with Sir Benedict and Master Ferris, who is tending to Miss Lancaster's condition. Ferris expresses uncertainty about her recovery as she remains unconscious from a head injury. When Madame Cavendish arrives uninvited, she reveals her intention to take Ferris's collection of items, threatening the lives of the captured women unless she gets what she wants. Despite Grimm's inclination to act, Ferris warns him against using force, acknowledging Cavendish's power and influence. Ferris, weakened by the situation, pleads with Grimm to protect the women. As Ferris succumbs to emotional distress, Grimm vows to do everything in his power to save them, though he remains uncertain about the enemy's plans and location. Meanwhile, a cat appears on deck, drawing Grimm's attention. In Chapter 47, Bridget, bound and imprisoned in a ventilation tunnel, battles frustration and fear. She struggles to free herself, her wrists raw from the tight bonds, and contemplates her situation. Despite the overwhelming terror, she draws on her survival instincts and focuses on her assets. Bridget finds a lumen crystal in her pocket, using it to illuminate the darkness. She uses her knowledge of leather to soften the bindings with blood, and with Folly's help, she manages to free her hands. Folly, weakened and unable to communicate without her crystals, expresses her relief. Bridget vows to free them both, despite the pain and uncertainty. She pushes herself to continue, determined to remain active and resilient, refusing to lie down in defeat. As she works on releasing Folly's ankles, she draws strength from her resolve, embracing the challenge ahead. In Chapter 48, Rowl races through the ventilation tunnels toward the Nine Claws territory to rescue Little Mouse. He fights his way through the guards, demonstrating his strength and skill, and soon gathers a group of warriors following him. He confronts the clan chief, Non, and argues that the Nine Claws are being hunted and controlled by humans using silkweavers. Rowl urges Non to resist the human influence and strike back to protect their future. Neen, Non's kit, challenges Rowl, calling him a fool and accusing him of lying. Rowl responds with a calm but threatening demeanor, ready to prove himself. Non, unsure who is right, allows a confrontation between Rowl and Neen. As the chapter ends, Rowl prepares to fight Neen with Little Mouse's fate hanging in the balance. The tension rises as Roll's war cry echoes, signaling the start of a crucial battle. In Chapter 49, Gwendolyn wakes up aboard the airship Predator, confused and disoriented with a head injury and bandages. After recovering slightly, she realizes she's alone on the ship, and her search for her cousin Benedict leads her to the engineering room. There, she meets Journeyman, the chief etheric engineer, who is struggling with the ship's power core. He initially dismisses her, but Gwen demonstrates her knowledge of airship systems, impressing him with her insight into the malfunctioning equipment. The conversation reveals the Predator's first-generation power core, which Gwen recognizes as highly efficient. She offers her expertise to assist Journeyman in improving the ship's systems, particularly with the lift crystal. Despite their differences, Gwen persuades Journeyman to adjust the configuration to prevent a potential disaster. This chapter highlights Gwen's resourcefulness and expertise, setting her up as a capable ally aboard the ship. In Chapter 50, Major Aspira is awakened by Sergeant Syriaco and informed that Madame Cavendish is present. Cavendish tells Aspira that they need to act quickly as an enemy commander, likely Captain Grimm, is approaching with privateers. She orders Aspira to strike key targets and extract immediately, leaving behind a mobile force to handle any pursuit. Aspira is reluctant but agrees, especially after Cavendish hints at the fate of the prisoners. Aspira directs Syriaco to prepare the men for rapid movement, leaving all supplies behind except weapons. Espira expresses his cold indifference towards the prisoner's fate, much to Cyriaco's visible distress. The chapter highlights Espira's sense of duty over moral concerns as he prepares for the mission, emphasizing the necessity of speed and precision to survive the unfolding chaos. Espira's internal conflict over the treatment of the prisoners and his orders reveals the complexity of his character. In Chapter 51, Grimm and Felix are led through the tunnels by a black cat, hoping it will guide them to the missing prisoners. They struggle to interpret the cat's behavior, as it navigates by smell and sound rather than reading maps. Grimm proposes a solution. He will follow the cat's pace and sketch the tunnels on the floor with chalk. After the cat leads him through the tunnels, Felix compares the sketch to the map and identifies the location of the prisoners. The enemy has blockaded 2 tunnels, leaving 2 others as escape routes. Grimm decides they need to approach from an unexpected direction to minimize casualties. He asks Stern to prepare the blasting charges they acquired earlier for a quick, forceful entry. The chapter sets the stage for an urgent, high-risk rescue operation with a focus on speed and surprise. In Chapter 52, Bridget and Folly are trapped, bound, and awaiting their fate when Bridget notices dozens of adult silkweavers infiltrating the abandoned Auroran camp. Bridget discovers Folly's crystals and her own gauntlet nearby. After a tense exchange, Bridget and Folly realize their best chance for escape lies in reaching the other tunnel, but the presence of the silkweavers complicates matters. As they strategize, they overhear a conversation between a woman named Sycorax Cavendish and a warriorborn named Sark. They discuss plans involving the silkweavers and mention baiting the mist shark and attacking a target. When Cavendish realizes Folly's potential, she threatens to kill the prisoners if Folly does not comply. Sark approaches Bridget with a sword drawn, but Cavendish uses her power to induce immense pain in Folly. In a moment of desperation, Bridget attempts to act, but the situation escalates with a sudden violent explosion that turns everything chaotic. In Chapter 53, Grimm and his crew breach a barricade with blasting charges, rushing into a smoky, chaotic tunnel. Inside, they find Bridget Tagwynn injured, surrounded by enemies, and Sark, the warriorborn, preparing for combat. Madame Cavendish rises, and Grimm attempts to neutralize her with a pistol, but a wave of silkweavers rushes toward them, forcing a brutal fight. As the silkweavers attack, Kettle, Creedy, and other aeronauts defend themselves, but the creatures' numbers overwhelm them. Benedict engages in a fierce battle with Sark, demonstrating impressive combat skills. However, the arrival of more silkweavers and Sark's unpredictable movements complicate their situation. As more verminiciders are killed, Grimm attempts a retreat, but their escape is blocked by more silkweavers. They fall back into a dead-end tunnel, and Madame Cavendish taunts Grimm before unleashing an overwhelming force of silkweavers, leaving them trapped and facing certain defeat. In Chapter 54, Folly experiences excruciating pain caused by Madame Cavendish's etheric attack, which overwhelms her mind. As the pain intensifies, Folly's consciousness separates from her body, and she finds herself in a strange, sandy landscape. She encounters a vast, shadowy entity, which reveals itself as the enemy, trying to control her. Despite the pressure, Folly uses her mind to manipulate the environment, creating steps of spirestone to escape. As she runs from the looming threat, she creates a door, and with a leap of faith, she exits into what seems to be the real world. She awakens surrounded by Bridget and Predator's crew, realizing she has escaped death. However, as she regains her bearings, she sees the silkweavers closing in on them, their eyes glowing red, and the enemy's voice echoes in her mind, commanding them to destroy her. The danger is far from over. In Chapter 55, Bridget and Folly are trapped in a tunnel surrounded by a group of silkweavers, with their only hope of survival resting on a last stand. Benedict, though injured by silkweaver venom, and Captain Grimm prepare to fight. Bridget straps on her gauntlet and steels herself for the inevitable. As the silkweavers close in, the situation seems hopeless, but Rowl and the Nine Claws arrive, causing chaos among the silkweavers. The cat's unpredictable movements overwhelm the creatures, buying time for the humans. As the battle rages, Rowl and the cats manage to defeat the remaining silkweavers. Afterward, Grimm speaks with Rowl, who demands help in locating the remaining Aurorans. Merle, another cat, reveals that the Aurorans are in the temple where they are killing and burning. Benedict urges immediate action, and Grimm orders his crew to move out, determined to stop the Aurorans. In Chapter 56, Rowl and the humans move towards the Temple of the Way, where they find the area filled with smoke and under threat from Auroran forces. Rowl had been instrumental in defeating the silkweavers, but now the group faces the mystery of why the temple was being burned. As the group approaches, Rowl uses his superior senses to scout the situation, and Grimm leads the charge with his men. They find a few Auroran prisoners who refuse to divulge information, raising suspicions. Benedict and the others debate the Aurorans' true intentions, suspecting the burning of the temple may be more than just a diversion. A voice from within the smoke hints at a survivor, prompting Benedict and Little Mouse to rush into the burning temple despite the danger. Rowl, fearing for Little Mouse's safety, follows her inside, determined to protect her from harm. In Chapter 57, Major Aspira oversees the final stages of an attack on Habel Landing. With his men surrounded by the Albion populace, Aspira's forces are dwindling, but their organization and preparation give them an advantage in the face of overwhelming numbers. As they set incendiary charges around the district, Aspira contemplates the destruction they are about to unleash, aware of the devastating impact on civilians. Meanwhile, Cavendish and her pet warriorborn, Sark, stand nearby, focused on the book she's reading, seemingly unconcerned with the chaos around them. Aspira orders his men to retreat while preparing to set the charges. As the explosions begin, he calmly informs Cavendish of the danger and advises her to leave. She responds with cold amusement, and Aspira watches as she walks away, relieved to be rid of her. Finally, he lights the fuse, preparing for the firestorm to engulf the area. In Chapter 58, Gwendolyn and Journeyman are working on adjusting a Hazlitt cage aboard the AMS Predator, when they hear the distant sound of discharging gauntlets. Rushing to the deck, Gwendolyn sees a group of Auroran Marines attacking the shipyard, killing several guardsmen and causing chaos. As she watches, she realizes that the Mist Shark, a ship preparing to cast off, is a transport for the Aurorans. Meanwhile, Auroran forces begin setting charges, causing fires to spread across the wooden decks. Gwendolyn is alarmed as she realizes that without the lift crystal working, Predator could fall from the spire, crushing everyone aboard. With the situation dire, Gwendolyn and Journeyman rush to the engine room to try and restore power and stop the impending disaster, knowing they must also deal with the threat from Mist Shark and the Aurorans. In Chapter 59, Bridget and Benedict rush into the burning Temple of the Way to rescue Brother Vincent, who is trapped under a heavy shelf. Despite the intense heat and smoke, Benedict manages to lift the shelf and Bridget pulls Vincent free. However, Vincent is badly burned and his back is broken. Before he dies, Vincent hands Benedict a book containing the index, the last remaining copy, and urges him to deliver it to the Spire Ark. As Benedict mourns, the silkweaver venom he was exposed to takes effect, and he collapses, twitching and foaming. Bridget, despite the danger, lifts Benedict and begins staggering toward the exit. She is attacked by a wounded Auroran Marine, and after a brutal fight, she kills him. Struggling to breathe through the thickening smoke, Bridget is disoriented and loses her way. Just as hope seems lost, Rowl appears, leading them out as the temple begins to collapse. In Chapter 60, Grimm and his men observe the chaos as the temple burns. Kettle expresses concern for Bridget and Benedict, but Grimm decides to wait before rushing in. They hear incendiary charges go off, signaling the start of a larger attack, which distracts the guards and allows the Aurorans to escape. Soon after, Bridget emerges from the smoke, carrying an unconscious Benedict and Master Rowl, with the book Vincent gave her in hand. Despite her injuries and exhaustion, she refuses help and continues to press forward. The group heads for the shipyard, where they encounter the destructive force of the Mist Shark. The shipyard is under heavy fire, with airships destroyed and debris falling. As the shipyard begins to collapse, Predator is hit, and Grimm watches helplessly as his ship is obliterated in a catastrophic explosion. In Chapter 61, Gwen and Journeyman work frantically to get the Predator's power core up and running amidst chaos as enemy fire targets the shipyard. The crew is in a race against time to prevent the ship from being destroyed. As the core comes to life, the ship trembles under etheric cannon blasts, signaling the imminent danger. With no pilot aboard, Journeyman prepares to engage a dive protocol to avoid being destroyed by enemy fire, though it's a risky move that could lead to a catastrophic crash. Gwen assists with securing the systems and manages to fix a critical wire just in time, ensuring the trim crystals receive power and preventing the ship from spinning out of control. As the ship begins its descent, the crew braces for impact, knowing their survival depends on stabilizing the ship before it crashes. In Chapter 62, Grimm grapples with the devastating loss of his ship, Predator, which was destroyed in the explosion. As the shipyard crumbles, he and his crew adjust to the reality of their situation. Miss Shark, the enemy ship, is preparing to depart for Spire Aurora. Despite the crushing loss, Grimm steels himself to lead his men, focusing on their next move. He rallies his crew, including Kettle, to prepare for the pursuit of Miss Shark. Bridget, still recovering from her ordeal, insists on staying with Benedict, refusing to go to a hospice. Grimm orders her to follow his orders if she stays. After a tense exchange, Predator miraculously reappears, having survived the explosion thanks to Journeyman's quick thinking. Grimm, resolute, plans to pursue Miss Shark despite being outgunned and understaffed, determined to reclaim Ferris's collection and exact revenge on the Aurorans. In Chapter 63, Folly experiences the awakening of Predator, feeling the ship's powerful presence as it begins to rise. The ship comes to life with glowing ether silk and a hum, and she realizes the connection between the ship and its captain, feeling the ship's personality and the captain's joy. The crew prepares for battle, and Folly is asked to help track Miss Shark's movements, as Predator's systems are fine-tuned for pursuit. Folly focuses on locating the Master's collection, which is aboard Miss Shark, and provides guidance for the pursuit. The captain explains a plan to sabotage Miss Shark's power system by using organic material such as grease to disrupt their Hazlitt cage. As Predator maneuvers through the mist, Folly's connection with the ship allows her to guide them towards the red star that marks the Master's collection. She is then sent to the Master, while the pursuit continues, with the captain determined to catch Miss Shark. In Chapter 64, Bridget regains consciousness in the infirmary aboard Predator, her body battered and bruised. She remembers her actions during the battle, including killing an Auroran soldier, and worries about Benedict's condition. Gwen, badly injured but alive, reassures her that Benedict is unconscious but still alive, though critically poisoned by silkweaver venom. Gwen explains that the wounded need Master Ferris's gear from the Miss Shark, which is now in pursuit. As Predator navigates through the skies, Bridget feels a surge of fear and grief. She begins to cry silently, comforted by Gwen's awkward but kind gesture. When the bell rings for general quarters, signaling that the ship is about to engage in battle, Bridget is strapped into place to avoid injury during maneuvers. Gwen and Dr. Bagan ensure that everyone, including Rowl, is secured. The chapter ends with the ship lurching, signaling imminent action. In Chapter 65, Major Aspira reflects on the success of his mission, which included significant destruction of Spire Albion's infrastructure and civilian casualties. He is relieved to have most of his men back, but struggles with the moral cost of their actions. Meanwhile, on the Miss Shark, Cavendish seeks Aspira's professional assessment of how quickly his men could seize the ship. Aspira estimates that his men could succeed in taking the Miss Shark 8 or 9 times out of 10. Cavendish's true intentions emerge as she discusses the ship's troubles and demands faster movement. Meanwhile, Captain Ransom, feeling undermined, reveals a hidden explosive threat aboard the ship to keep Cavendish and Aspira in check. Just as tensions rise, Predator suddenly appears, attacking the Miss Shark. Despite heavy damage, Ransom orders evasive action, but with the webs severely damaged, she realizes their only chance of survival is to reach their escort. In Chapter 66, Captain Grimm and his crew on Predator are in pursuit of the Miss Shark. After a surprise attack, they manage to damage the Miss Shark's web, leaving it vulnerable. As Predator ascends for another attack, Grimm contemplates the power and grace of his ship, feeling the thrill of battle. The crew prepares for another strike, and after several precise attacks, the Miss Shark's web is destroyed, leaving it defenseless. Calliope Ransom surrenders, and her crew is taken as prisoners of war. Grimm demands the Miss Shark's cannon be disabled, and that Ransom and her crew obey his commands under threat of immediate retaliation. However, just as Ransom boards her launch to leave, a new threat emerges, a fast-moving airship approaching from the west. Grimm orders Predator to prepare for battle, realizing that the situation may have just taken a dire turn. In Chapter 67, Captain Grimm's crew races through the mesosphere, pursued by the Auroran battlecruiser Itasca. Gwen Lancaster, strapped to safety lines, arrives on the bridge and learns that Grimm freed Calliope Ransom to avoid a costly truce break during combat. Predator's lighter frame lets her ascend faster, but Itasca's relentless raking fire gradually eats away at Predator's web. Grimm's gambit is to draw the chase back towards Spire Albion, using pre-deployed signal rockets to lure HMS Glorious from mist cover as reinforcements. As Itasca closes, Predator keeps weaving evasively and firing stern guns to cripple Itasca's web, slowing her advance. Gwen realizes Predator cannot dive until Journeyman refits her, so their only hope lies in holding out until Glorious emerges. When Itasca finally torches a large section of Predator's web, the ship lurches and one trim run fails, but Grimm orders an immediate climb into Glorious's shadow, ready to combine forces or continue the desperate flight. In Chapter 68, Captain Grimm faces the overwhelming threat of Itasca, a larger, heavily armed battlecruiser. As Itasca prepares to destroy Predator, Grimm orders a desperate and calculated attack, targeting the enemy ship's bridge with his gunners, despite the odds. With the ship's trim array failing and no clear escape, Grimm prepares for a devastating confrontation. Just as Predator is pushed to its limits, reinforcements arrive. Commodore Baird's AFS Valiant, Thunderous, and Victorious, launching a devastating barrage at Itasca, crippling the battlecruiser's hull. Amid the chaos, Predator uses the opportunity to strike at Itasca's vulnerable belly, with a well-timed shot igniting a catastrophic explosion. As Itasca succumbs to the damage, her colors fall, signaling surrender. The battle ends with Itasca's defeat and her captain acknowledging Grimm with a nod, marking the victory for Predator. In Chapter 69, Bridget tends to Benedict as he recovers from the effects of the silkweaver venom. After waking in the infirmary aboard Predator, Benedict struggles with the after effects of the battle but gradually regains his composure. Bridget and Benedict share a quiet, intimate moment as they talk about their injuries and the events that transpired. Gwen, meanwhile, wrestles with the emotional trauma of her recent actions in battle, feeling disconnected from those who have not shared the same experiences. She confides in Captain Grimm, who helps her navigate her feelings of guilt and confusion. Rowl, still recovering from his injuries, contemplates his own despair, but with Little Mouse's encouragement and food, he slowly recovers. Meanwhile, on Miss Shark, Cavendish writes from memory the contents of a stolen book, which holds crucial names. The chapter ends with a foreboding sense of an impending crisis, as Ferris reveals that the dreams are visions of the future, the beginning of the end.